Are we in the West complicit by not delegitimizing Vladimir Putin, by not calling him the so-called Russian president after an undemocratic election? Are we complicit?
Yes, we are. Now, I know there is the danger of global war and so on. So I'm not saying we should do crazy things, but we should first set a clear red line, how do you call it, limit. And and if Russia crosses that limit, I agree here with Macron. Everybody was shocked when he said we cannot totally exclude the possibility that Western NATO soldiers, we have to...
What is the line for you, Slavoj? Just out of interest.
The line is this one. I'm here pretty open. I know that that Ukrainians were making mistakes, nationalistic mistakes, that Russians in the Donbas region were oppressed and so on. But you know, I remember the first day of the intervention. Biden was asked what will be the reaction. And he said something very sensible for me. He said, let's wait and see. Is this just a limited operation to just gain a little bit of territory there? No, now it's clear. Putin is repeating it again. We have to get rid of the Nazi, whatever, regime there. So that should be the limit. Ukraine should survive.
Is there any naivety to Vladimir Putin? He's got this very set idea of what he wants to do. He wants to claim back territory. He wants to create another Soviet Union. Is there any naivety to that?
But it's creative naivety. What do I mean by this? It's this type of most intelligent naivety where he says all the time openly what he wants, but he counts on the fact that we in the West will not take him seriously. I remember even the days before Russian aggression of Ukraine began. All my political friends, I had many of them, not only in Slovenia, were saying, this is rhetoric, don't take it too seriously, and so on and so on. But Putin is playing this game, which is, I think, the most intelligent form of cheating. Cheat, deceive with truth itself. You just say what you really want and count on the fact that people will not take you seriously. So naivety is a very dangerous thing. We learned the same from Hitler, from all the totalitarians, and so on.
Let's talk about your book, Christian Atheism. I want to ask you this. For the first time in a census of England and Wales, less than half the population here, 46%, describe themselves as Christian. Okay, so for the first time ever, it went below 50% Christian, people describing themselves as Christian. No religion was the second most common response in that census. That increased by 12 percentage points. So you can see where this is going. I wonder whether the rise of the right wing in Europe, whether the rise of MAGA in the US, I wonder whether that means we feel less unified by religion. What is the reason that we're falling out of love with religion?
With which religion? I read somewhere that it's for me an extremely interesting data that in the United States, if you focus on top corporate managers, you know what the large majority of them is? Not atheists, not Christians, but what I call ironically Western Buddhists. Some kind of enlightened.
next time. Keep having a blast behind that camera. Cut.
Hey everyone! Today we have an exciting tutorial for all you photography.
Photoshop isn't just for professionals. Real social media managers know some of the best photos are the ones snapped on a phone in a hurry. And yes, sometimes these photos are imperfect. You took a photo from behind a car window, use generative fill to remove the light rays. People in the way of your shot, select, remove. See yourself in the mirror? Gone. Generative Fill helps you with quick fixes so you can go straight to posting. Or keep editing in Photoshop. Everything is right there.
Meditation and so on, and this has a very dangerous conservative role. Why? You know that it always shocked me. Heinrich Himmler, if there ever was a bad guy, it's him. SS, the organizer of Holocaust. You know what was his favorite book? Bhagavad Gita. You know why? His question was, we are doing horrible things. We, SS. How can we retain our dignity without us becoming beasts, even if we are doing beastly things like an SS officer? So
We don't have to label it then either, do we? I wonder why you think, you know, now the majority, well, under 50% of people in the UK now declare themselves as Christian. Are people shamed? Are people worried about declaring themselves as Christian? Are people falling out of the love with religion, maybe in its traditional sense?
But maybe this is not
Yeah,
so bad, you know why? Because in the sense that I speak about atheism, which is for me...
Have you already
Christian
added me?
atheism. The lesson of Christianity is God dies.
I can do
Not
two
only
verses too.
representative of God. God himself dies on the cross. What is left is we, a community with a firm commitment and so on and so on. And I think that most of people who call themselves Christians are still committed, unfortunately, to some kind of a pagan version, whereas there is God up there, we are here, and God sent a messenger, Christ. Okay, it didn't work. Okay, my child come back to me, I will try again. No, no. Christianity is for me literally an atheist religion, and especially important again.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Okay.
It's not what you think deep into yourself. You know what? You find
Okay.
Christianity a very deep insight that if I look deep into myself,
Well,
I
in
will
that
not
case, I'll lead with the
discover
heavy.
some
Well,
inner truth and so on. I will discover probably a lie, stories I invent to myself that legitimize
heavy
the
damage.
horrors I'm doing in actual life.
I'm gonna
For
leave
me,
with the brick
truth
house
is
and
out
go
there,
to Zephyr.
like that series years ago. The
And then
truth
MD.
is out there.
Unless
the
you
truth
think-
is not deep in you. That's for me the lesson
That's
of
interesting.
Christianity. Here, Christianity is the opposite
Some I
of
need
all
to try.
those Oriental meditation religions where they say go deep into you. No,
Yeah.
sorry to use this vulgar word. If you go deep into yourself, you discover shit. We are all dirty deep in ourselves.
That's interesting. So let's talk about the second part to that question then, and the rise of the right wing in Europe, and also MAGA in the US. And I wonder whether, if we're less unified by religion, if we're less prepared to say that we follow organised religion, traditional religion, if we talk about Christianity, etc. whether the rise of the right wing, whether the rise of the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, whether that unifies us, whether we need a common cause, if we're not all following the Bible, if we're not all following Christianity, do we need another common cause? And is that why we've seen the rise of other?
You will not find it there, because you know...
I know you won't, but do you think that's the reason why...
Yeah, okay. You know, once in the United States, I gave an interview to a conservative commentator who asked me about moral majority. And my answer was, I'm totally for moral majority, but not for Trump. Trump is for me a model of a politician who preaches Christian values and so on. But look at how Trump acts. Isn't he, in his actions, the ultimate postmodern, relativist, cynical politician? He even doesn't believe himself. He changes his position all the time. He makes cynical golden jokes and so on. So, for me, Trump is the ultimate postmodern, cynical politician, while if there is any politician admitted in the United States, that's why I really like him, is Bernie Sanders. Isn't he a simple common man, never lost in any big rhetoric?
Yeah, very, very clear.
For me, the very notion of moral majority. Okay. My solution is the left should take over the terms of respect, peace, even law and order, moral majority. Why? We live now in a very dangerous time, where in developed and third world countries, gang rule or illegal organizations are taking over. You read horrible news in Haiti these days. Gangs practically took over the state. And other countries like Salvador. All around, it is as if the system cannot any longer reproduce itself without subterranean links to illegal, violent gangs. In the United States, it's the same. Trump and the Proud Boys and all those half terrorists, half illegal organizations. Unfortunately, in Israel, it's similar. Don't forget that now the Minister of State Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he was condemned by the Israeli court as a terrorist 20 or 15 years ago. So this worries me very much, and as a guy with whom I don't always agree, but sometimes he has good ideas, Yuval Harari said, today we live in a crazy world where the right wing took over the revolutionary rhetoric and activity. You remember 6th of January 2 years ago? A popular crowd tried to overtake power.
3 years ago, we should say.
Sorry, yeah. But you know what was the paradox? My leftist friend cried and said, but we, the people, should be doing this. No. This vulgarity, brutality is now the domain of the right. And the left should discover common decency, civility, politeness, and so on.
But do you think, arguably, the left has less power and influence on that level? And I'm talking about, you know, the fact that Bernie Sanders was, you know, discussed, the left of American politics was discussed a lot in the 2020 election, certainly more than it is in the run-up to this one. In this country, we had Jeremy Corbyn lead the Labour Party. Now, that all went terribly wrong, but there was a definite nod to the left, to socialism. And now we have a very centrist Labour Party, a Conservative Party who are desperate to claim and identify with the right. And in America, you've had the centralist President Biden, and now, you know, again, you are leaning into the right with Donald Trump. So,
Israel is at war in an unprovoked, murderous attack that has claimed the lives of hundreds of Israelis.
Does this then, you know, leave out the liberal left? Does this mean they actually carry less influence?
Yeah, I'm here pessimist, and I agree with my friend Yanis Varoufakis, who claims that the key to these events is something very tragic. The left, the moderate left, is losing because it is still obsessed. It's very conservative power. Force, political force, because its dream is still, let's return to the golden era of social democratic welfare state. That's over. Varoufakis is right when he says that what we are having today is something that's problematic, but he calls it techno-feudalism. These mega corporations today, Apple, Amazon, and so on, they are no longer ordinary capitalist agencies. They are neo-feudal corporations controlling a certain domain. And this changes
controlling
the entire picture.
Yes, controlling what
For
we
example,
see, the kind of
distribution of books,
news we
media,
intake.
Yeah. And here, so the problem is not how to counter capitalism. The problem is that capitalism is no longer the good old capitalism against which traditional social democracy worked relatively well. And you know what is so sad? That Trump knows this in some sense. He very intelligently uses this when he paints as the enemy the deep state, that is to say big corporations controlling us. He is simply up to a point right here. So I'm here totally opportunistic. I don't exclude anything. I'm even tempted to say that maybe at some strategic point the left should join forces with, sorry to use this very naive term, small creative capitalists against big corporations. Yeah. We are now in such a suffocating pseudo-dynamic where everything changes, but the situation is getting more and more oppressive. Democracy is reaching an end, and especially, here I deplore the British Brexit. For me, in spite of all horrors that it did, I like the idea of European Union, which means different countries with different culture come together just to guarantee certain basic coordinates: ecology, women's rights, human rights, and so on. What we have now all around the globe is this new nightmarish global capitalism combined politically and religiously with returning to strong nation states. Look at China. This is something new going on there. Now they are putting all the pressure on Uyghurs, on Tibetans. China is taking from the West, from Western Enlightenment, precisely that a thing that we should abandon today, which is strong nation state. Look at Modi in India. Hindu nationalism doing the same. Putin is basically doing the same, and so on. So,
there's lots of nations wanting to
611.
claim that kind of strong nation state. You know, perhaps we've become more selfish. Perhaps we want to take back ownership. I think, you know, certainly here in the UK, one of the most common reasons why people voted Brexit is that whether this is right or not, we want our country back. We want to be making the decisions that affect us as the UK. We don't want a court in Brussels making them for us. Now, you know, ironically, most of our laws, legislation, the way we live is still according to what happens in Europe. Most of it is, with a few small caveats.
Not only this, but I think that in today's global situation, when there are new power blocks, Russia, China, India, United States, this united Europe will simply become a popular tourist place and no longer what it should be.
In terms of power?
In terms of power.
Right.
Military power, economic power, and so on. But
and that's when I'm pretty concerned, isn't it, about the power of India, the power of China?
Yeah,
okay.
And that's very dangerous. Because already now for the Chinese, I have many friends there, they told me, Europe, very interesting. If we are interested in development, we go to the United States. But Europe, London, Venice, tourist place. They treat us as a tourist.
Interesting.
But do you also notice, sorry, just to conclude, another important point. That's what makes me a little bit pro-European still. Do you notice how now anti-Eurocentrism is appropriated by almost everybody? Latin American leftists are against Eurocentrism. Trump is terribly against centralized Europe. He wants to dismember Europe into autonomous states. Putin is against Eurocentrism. Everybody is against Eurocentrism precisely now, when the European legacy, what is hopefully authentic in this legacy, human rights, feminism, and all that, some economic justice is undermined everywhere.
Let's talk about a potential second term in presidency for Donald Trump. So in 2016, I was watching an interview and you said you would vote for Trump, mainly because you didn't like what Hillary Clinton had to offer. You didn't like her version of capitalists, that she presented essentially progressive, but actually she's a capitalist. And you also said that if Trump was elected back in 2016, it would disturb the political consensus.
It did. I think without Trump there wouldn't have been a small level of democratic socialism. But let me interrupt you, I'm sorry, but you know, now no way for Trump. I think, you know...
What do you mean by that, sorry?
I mean this. At that point, although the result was a little bit disappointing, I think that 4 years of Trump's presidency made it clear to everybody what Trump stands for. We needed that experience. And I think another thing...
But then why do Americans want to go back to that? Because the majority of the Americans favour Donald Trump, and so they're telling us they want that again.
Center left, no, they really don't. This is why they are escaping into woke culture, cancel culture, and so on. Do they really have any clear vision apart from simply returning to the old social democratic ideal and so on and so on? Biden is not even so bad here. You remember a couple of months ago he went to Chicago or where to support the auto workers strike and so on. But no, I think that we are approaching, that's why I call myself a communist, ironically, but warning. Moderately conservative communist, no? Communist means this. Look at ecology. Look at all these temperature oscillations and so on. These are problems which cannot be resolved locally. It's a matter of survival to invent a more tight international cooperation. Concerning immigration, here I disagree with many of my leftist friends whose solution is, oh, let's just open borders and so on and so on. No, this is a catastrophe for me. Because then you will have here right-wingers returning to power. Listen, see what's happening now in Germany, but especially in Denmark, Sweden, and so on. Maybe in France it will be. So we are economically, militarily, ecologically approaching deadlock. And I think that the liberal left still approaches the problem in the sense of let's just do it a little bit in a more moderate, careful way. Basically, they don't want to change anything, just let's try with our lives going on the way they are. No, there will be a need for a radical change. If we, the enlightened people, don't do it, sorry, then the true right-wingers will do it.
Let's finish off with the shades of time. And when we look back on this generation, this era, how do you think it will be defined?
Ah, wonderful that you said this. My love is to study quantum physics. And you know, this idea of hologramic approach where the same situation could be retroactively redefined in different ways. Our situation now, I think, is hologramic in the sense that it can be read in 3-4 different ways, and the situation is open. I'm no longer Marxist in the sense of there is the goal of socialism or whatever. We don't know. We are really in a radically open situation. We will see retroactively what is really happening today. But we will...
What is happening today?
Sorry?
What is happening today?
But again, my point is here much more paradoxical. What is happening today is an open situation where it's not clear where it leads. It's up to us. Maybe if Western Europe collapses, they will say Western Europe was just an aberration. Really, we are entering this new BRICS era, which I find nightmarish and so on. You know, it's... okay, I will draw a megalomaniac comparison with culture. I admire Shakespeare. But you know that Shakespeare became Shakespeare only in the late 18th century. After his death, he was ignored more or less for 100 years. The French classicists, Racine and so on, took over. I think it's the same situation today. We are like Shakespeare. European legacy is like Shakespeare. Will it be rediscovered the way Shakespeare was discovered, or will it remain some marginal aberration in global progress towards something much more nightmarish? So again, I think, you know who is my ideal here, Lester? I read a book on Zhou Enlai, the second guy after Mao. You know, when he was in 53 in Geneva, I think, for negotiations to end the Korean War, a French journalist asked him, what do you think about French Revolution? And you know what Zhou Enlai answered? It's too early to say. And he was right, because when socialism collapsed in 1989, it was exactly 200 years under French Revolution. And still now a struggle is going on. The liberal conservative version is all that revolutionary period was an aberration. But maybe not. I'm still sympathetic to Jacobins. And you see, it becomes clear retroactively. It depends on us. I don't believe in fate. Or I believe in fate, but through our activity, we are creating our fate.
Yeah.
We, in some sense, are changing the past. You don't believe me? I will quote to you your biggest conservative poet, whom I like, T.S. Eliot, who said, somewhere in his tradition and individual talent, that each new work of art, great one, it's not only a cut with the past, but in some sense changes our perception, the logic of the entire past. That we are where we are today, in an open situation. To use the quantum terminology, there are many superpositions, but we don't know in what new form they will collapse. It's an open situation.
Let's leave it there. Absolutely fascinating, and I've enjoyed our conversation very much. Thank you, Slavoj Žižek.
And it was an honor for me.
A great pleasure to have you with us. And a reminder that Slavoj's new book, Christian Atheism, is out on the 4th of April.
Thank you.
Fantastically full room we have, and I think we also have an overflow room tonight. I'm Pernice, and I'll be chairing tonight, and I will introduce Professor Žižek in just a moment. I'd like to just say a little bit about the IPA, which is hosting this event tonight. And I can't see Connor, who I'd like to introduce. Oh, you have Connor. You're supposed to be at the front. The Institute of Public Affairs is a sort of a relaunched part of the LSC with Professor Conor Gearty at the back as the director, and myself, everybody's turning around right on cue, and myself as a deputy director, where we have a very successful Masters in Public Administration. We have also some innovative work, which you may have heard about. For example, we're now crowdsourcing and using crowdsourcing, so anybody here wants to have an input or a say in that, please get in touch with me or with Jack, who I'm going to point out now, can you wave? Who will be available to tell you more about it at the end.
You need to don't be afraid.
As I was saying, okay, so we have the Constitution Project.
Descartes was right. Women's mind is impressible. You can't think.
Are we having a fight tonight?
Absolutely. Till death. Okay. Till yacht.
We've had a series of talks around One Nation Britain, which I will be publishing something on shortly. There's really been an interesting debate between political parties, academics, and commentators around what does the idea of one nation mean, and what is it about? Who owns it? Who has the history? Who wants to take forward ideas for the country as we move forward? And the other project I want to mention to you is one on women in public life called Women Above the Parapet, where we're looking at how women have succeeded at getting into senior positions in politics, diplomacy, academia, and civil society. Some of you may have been at the lecture by Joyce Banda from a couple of weeks ago. And we have a new one on More Women Can Run by Professor Sue Carroll on the 24th of November. That's our next event. But really, we're really delighted to be hosting Professor Slavoj Žižek tonight. The IPA exists really to look at the linkages between scholarship and public life, public policy, how we think, what we do, and we're very, very delighted to host you here tonight. I agreed as though I had 60-odd pages of biography that exists online. Very briefly, on the website. Savoy is a Hegelian philosopher, Birkbeck Institute of Humanities, and the author of numerous books on dialectical materialism, art. And tonight, book, which I can wait, later tonight after. More 45 and 40. But he has asked me to be fairly strict with time as he's speaking, so I will keep an eye on that. And we will then have about half an hour or so, if we stick to time, to have questions. So I would like to stay seated, so just put the microphone. And I won't delay you any longer. You all need to be so
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm also grateful to IPA, which incidentally for me means, of course, also International Psychoanalytic Association, no? But I'm really grateful to be here, and my brief intervention may be because from the attacks, what you can gather from the so you are in for some good. Okay. The need to censor our dreams. By this, I simply refer to the fact, especially those social thinkers, politicians who like to or would like to propose an alternative reality, how difficult it really is to imagine an alternative. Precisely in our era, when things in so-called real life are really changing. Just think about biogenetics. For example, what always intrigued me, I follow it closely, is how new options our mind inspired what was once considered a magic is gradually becoming an everyday practice that you like
Carneta.
talking no longer need you think the computer can decode what you think and the object moves. Your thoughts have a direct effect on reality. Of course, the problem here is what goes out, goes over. Precisely in an epoch where almost everything appears to be possible at the level of technology or private sectors and so on. How today it's much easier to imagine the end of the world, of our lives, than to imagine a 3% raise of taxes for healthcare or education. And another colleague of mine, Alenka Zupančić from Slovenia, Ljubljana, also made this point. How, on the one hand, practically everything seems possible today. You can travel into space, we have this This is all possible, but the level of social life and economy address this. I want to begin with someone who might appreciate that mankind I appreciate him, but nonetheless, I have a critical point to make. In his recent text, with the title On the Twilight of the West,
Who the hell is this guy?
diagnosis of the here comes this, slightly, maybe too long to quote. In the 21st century, the old spell of universal progress, whether through Western-style socialism or capitalism and democracy, has been decisively broken. The global crisis, which is as much moral and intellectual as it is political and environmental, puts into question above all our long submission to Western ideas of politics. Whether it is catastrophic wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or disastrous interventions in Libya, the financial crisis of 2008, soaring unemployment in Europe, which seems like a problem with no solution, in power far right parties across the continent, the unresolved crisis of the euro, hideous income disparities in both Europe and the United States, the widespread suspicion that big money has corrupted democratic processes, the absurdly dysfunctional American political system, Edward Snowden's revelations about the NSA, or the dramatic loss of a sense of possibility for young people everywhere. All of this, separately and together, has not only severely depleted the West's moral authority, but also weakened its intellectual hegemony. The Western path to modernity can no longer be regarded as normal. It cannot be the standard against which historical change in other parts of the world is measured. Europeans had created their own kind of modernity in the very particular historical circumstances of the 19th and 20th century. And other people have been trying since then, with varying degrees of success, to imitate it. But there are, and always were, other ways of conceiving of the state, society, economy, and good life. They all have their own specific difficulties and challenges. Nevertheless, it will be possible to understand them only through an open and sustained engagement with non-Western societies and their political and intellectual traditions. Such an effort, formidable in itself, would also go against every instinct of the self-regarding universalism that West has upheld for 2 centuries. But it will be needed if we wish to seriously confront the great problem confronting the vast majority of 7 billion human beings, how to secure a dignified and sustainable life amid deepening inequality and animosity in an interdependent world. End of quote. Now this seems almost a commonplace, a doxa today, universally acceptable. Well, I cannot more disagree with it. Why? These long passages again render in a concise way the post-colonial common sense, the failure of the Western civilization as a global model, and the failure of those decolonized nations which tried to emulate it. There is, nonetheless, I claim, a problem with this diagnosis. Yes, the lesson of post-September 11th catastrophe is the end of the Fukuyama dream of global liberal democracy. But at the level of economy, capitalism has triumphed worldwide. The third world nations which endorsed it are those which are now growing with spectacular rates. The mass of cultural diversity is sustained by the actual universalism of the global capital. So my point is, I'm tired of this post-colonial critique, your Western universalism of human rights is imposed, it's not a true universalism. I'm not talking about that universalism. I'm talking about capitalist universalism, where simply all these cultural differences are in some sense irrelevant. When a British manager and a Chinese manager meet in business negotiations. Yes, we can play endlessly these games when they use words like truth, peace, whatever. Do they mean the same thing? It doesn't matter. the deal is done. That's the actual universalism. And I find it paradoxical when people talk about decline of the West and the end of Western universalism, when precisely Western capitalism effectively is universal. And this new global capitalist functions, that's for me the ultimate paradox, even better if its political supplement relies on so-called, I'm not a racist here, it has nothing to do with Asia, what we falsely call Asian values, a more authoritarian version. Global capitalism, I claim, has no problem in accommodating itself to a plurality of local religions, cultures, traditions, and so on. I think, for example, that there is no paradox in what, if I know the media, what I know from the media, if it's right, maybe you know much better than me, like now in India, Modi, how is it called? How do you pronounce it? Modi, yes. At the same time, at least he was, I don't know how hypocritical he is now, a pretty violent Hinduist nationalist and a total partisan of the most ruthless global capitalism. This is global capitalism. Global capitalism is not we must all eat hamburgers and so on. The form of global capitalism is more and more narrow nationalism. Global capitalism, again, has no problem in accommodating this plurality of local cultures and so on. So the cruel irony of anti-Eurocentrism is that, on behalf of anti-colonialism, one criticizes the West at the very historical moment when global capitalism no longer needs so-called Western cultural values in order to function smoothly, and it's doing quite well with authoritarian alternate modernities. In short, one tends to proclaim Western cultural values that, at the very moment when critically reinterpreted, of course, many of them, egalitarianism, welfare state, and so on, can effectively serve as a weapon against capitalist globalization. And I'm not bluffing here. You know, for example, when I was in India, I noticed how all those whose mouths are full against Western imperialism and so on are usually the Brahmin cultural studies people who went even up to defending Hindu caste system as, you know, it's our cultural specificity, what right do you from your Western imperialist perspective have to cancel it? While on the other hand, where I immediately felt at home is with untouchables and with, how do you call them, Dalits, the untouchables, the lowest, plus with, I have some sympathies for them, with, how do you call them, Naxalites, the Maoist Naxalites, yes. Here you can see how biased around media. There are almost 1 million of them, and you barely don't read of them. There is a great rebellion going on in India. It's ignored. Or the political struggle with which I am involved, there, Gandhi against Ambedkar, a more egalitarian tradition. You know, Gandhi, I have problems with Gandhi. He was a great guy. He did many great things. But, you know, his attitude towards caste was, sorry, what I'm tempted to call proto-fascist. He was not for the abolition of caste. His motto was, every caste is divine, they have their own role to play, their own... And the Dalits, whom I met, the lowest of the lowest, those who clean the dry toilets, they told me, no, we don't want to keep our specific identity. We want to disappear. We want no longer to be who we are. We don't care if you say we also have a divine role and so on. So let's go on. So we should bear in mind that global capitalism does not automatically push all its subjects towards hedonist permissive individualism that we have in our countries. And the fact that in many countries which recently entered the road of rapid capitalist modernization, China, India, and so on, many individuals stick to the so-called traditional, pre-modern beliefs and ethics, family values, rejection of unbridled hedonism, strong ethnic identification, giving preference to community ties over individual achievement, respect for elders, and so on. This in no way proves that they are not fully modern, as if people in the liberal West can afford direct and full capitalist modernization, while those from less developed Asian, Latin American, African countries can only survive the onslaught of capitalist dynamics through the help of the crutches of traditional ties. That is to say, as if traditional values are needed when local populations are not able to survive capitalism by way of adopting the proper capitalist, liberal, hedonist, individualist ethics. I think that post-colonial, subaltern theorists who see in the persistence of pre-modern traditions in global capitalism and its violent modernization, disruptive of traditional ties, who perceive in this way global capitalism, I think are here wrong. On the contrary, fidelity to pre-modern, so-called falsely Asian values is paradoxically the very feature which allows countries like China, Singapore, India to follow the path of capitalist dynamics even more radically than Western liberal countries. Reference to traditional values enable individuals to justify their ruthless engagement in market competition, to justify it in ethical terms, like I'm really doing is to help my parents to earn money so that my children will be able to study, and so on and so on. We can say something similar about today's China, I think. It is wrong to claim that China faces the choice of becoming a truly capitalist country or of maintaining the communist rule which thwarts the full capitalist development. I claim this choice is a false one. In today's China, capitalist growth is exploding not in spite of the communist rule, but because of it. Far from being an obstacle to capitalist development, the communist rule guarantees the best conditions for unbridled capitalism. Here we should be effectively anti-Eurocentrist. It's our prejudice that there is something like a natural marriage between capitalism and so-called Western hedonist individual values. No, this marriage is dissolving today. It's approaching divorce. Today, and that's for me the danger, the tragedy, we have new forms of capitalism, China, Singapore, and so on, which function even more smoothly in the sense of course, crazy capitalist self-destructive dynamics, and have no need of the democratic freedoms, and so on and so on. Capitalism today functions even better without democracy. So again, how in these conditions can we imagine an alternative? The problem that I see is not only that it's difficult to imagine a radical alternative. Everybody knows this. Although incidentally, we all know that something is wrong. And my ultimate proof here, I hope I am like me, I like Hollywood blockbusters and so on, where friends are telling me, but you are a stupid Marxist, probably you are still influenced by your communist Yugoslav past. Where do you see class divisions today? I tell them I see them in Hollywood. Did you notice how almost all big blockbusters tell an extremely violent story of a new post-apocalyptic society with radical class divisions, Hunger Games, Elysium, and so on? My God, Hollywood knows it. You know, it would be very nice, in this sense, to read even James Bond films in a symptomatic way as a document of our era. I'm thinking about two moments. The first one is, did you notice that James Bond films, traditionally, are one of the few films in which you can still see the active material productive process? But you know where? In the middle of the film, usually, Bond penetrates the bad guy's private domain, the small factory, where they either process drugs, deal with diamonds, gold. There you see production, material production. And then what's the function of James Bond? He's almost a kind of an agent of those theorists of disappearing labor and so on. His function is to exploit this, so that, you know, we no longer have material production and so on. The other thing that makes me sad, but I don't have time to improvise in this in James Bond films, is that, do you notice a sad thing in one before, not the last one before, Quantum of Solace? It was a standard feature of James Bond films that at the very end you have big sex between Bond and Bond girl. This one, where the woman, the Bond girl is Olga Kurylenko, is the first one, remember, with no sex at the end. They just embrace, they are too desperate, they go apart. Why is this so fascinating? Because you cannot accuse it of being a conservative film. On the other hand, politically, Quantum of Solace is the most leftist Bond that I can imagine. Basically, explicitly, James Bond saves Morales' regime from some bad multinational company which wants to monopolize water supply in Bolivia. But no, you know why I say it's not any feminist potential, like let's step out of this male chauvinist, penetrative, whatever sexuality. It's something much more ominous. Did you notice how you find the same thing in, now I'm really moving to lowest of the lowest, Dan Brown novels and films. Did you notice how already Da Vinci Code, no sex, you cannot screw the granddaughter of Jesus Christ, no. But did you notice how in Angels and Demons, the last film, something very strange happens. You have sex in the novel at the end, between Langdon and that Italian scientist, Vittoria Vestra, but not in the film. Isn't it strange? Once we thought Hollywood adds sex to make it more commercial, now Hollywood is erasing sex. I don't think there is anything progressive. Sad tendency, whose expression is also the excess of political correctness and Western Buddhism and so on. The idea is this one. You know, in English and in French, there is the expression to fall in love, which precisely refers to the verb fall. We fall in love. And that's what is wonderful. Love, fall. You are surprised, shocked, you open yourself to it. We are no longer ready to fall in love. We are all these fake Buddhists, Richard Gere-like Buddhists, you know, like, as they say in Star Wars, you know, don't identify yourself too much, don't attach yourself too much to worldly object, gain a distance, and so on. So I really think that we are approaching an era where casual one-night stands, that's okay. A full passionate love affair, you are over-attaching yourself. The spontaneous ethics today, I claim, is no longer the ethics of passionate attachment. Fall in love, dedicate yourself. No, it's something like a vulgarized version. She's my friend, I appreciate her. A kind of vulgarized version of Judith Butler, you know. Reconstruct your identity all the time, don't fixate yourself, experiment with your life, and so on and so on. And it's very sad what is happening here, because it's the same phenomenon at all levels. What I mocked in all my books, you know how we have to make beer but without alcohol, coffee without caffeine, without fat. When we also have sex, well, basically without sex, called safe sex. Safe sex, you know. It's horrible. Like, one of the most depressive experiences I had is a couple of months ago, I was flying to the United States, and that, how's it called, Hemispheres, the plain journal of human sex. There was a big 2-page text celebrating sex. Ooh, I said, let's read it. It depressed me totally. It praised sex, but you know how? If you fornicate often, it helps your sex. You will live longer. It even goes that deep French kisses are good because they keep firm your mouth muscles so that when you are old you will not. Yeah. It's horrible. We made consumerism. Maybe that's why we are so afraid of smoking. I don't smoke, but I think there is something absolutely symptomatic about our obsession with smoking. It cannot be rational. At the level of rational reality, I say no problem, punish them and so on, companies. That's not my point. My point is what? I claim that what really disturbs us when you see a smoker is someone who is ready to risk it and enjoy to the end. That disturbs us. this is why, this is a nice symptom. Recently I read American airline companies prohibited even e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes. You know what's the reasoning? Not it's dangerous, but that by using e-cigarette, you give their example to others that you are not able to control yourself. Next step is, it happened 3-4 weeks ago in Australia. I was shocked. I thought it was a joke.
Who would want that?
In Perth, you know, the modern West Perth, Australia, they have an opera. That opera decided to prohibit Carmen by Bizet. You know why? Because the first act takes place in a tobacco history, so it can be read as propaganda for tobacco. No, sorry, I claim that this attitude of, you know, like what they call Clinton sex, you know, you like have it without fully enjoying it, without. I claim this is a very sad indication of an extremely controlled subjectivity emerging, where basically the ultimate creep, dangerous intruder, is the other as such. That's why I also oppose, up to a point at least, the topic of harassment. Of course I'm against harassment when rapes happen and so on. I mean, I'm one of the few guys whom I know who is even for death penalty. I'm just saying that if you just go a little bit beneath the surface, you find that there is more hidden in this fear of harassment. Harassment is as clear for me with my American friends, all these upper middle class academics. Harassment basically means all those loud, ordinary people who smell bad, who talk dirty, blah, 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 they shouldn't come too close to me. Harassment is the very form of intolerance. It means I love blacks, but they smell bad, so I don't want them too close to me. And that's how racism functions today. Nobody almost is openly a racist today. Nobody always they are one to the other. But, you know, I don't like their spices, their music, and so on. Okay, so, I lose time, you know, as usual. Maybe I will go on at this level of harassment, and so on, make a detour, and then maybe...
Can't spell cheat.
To center of dreams, because I would like to focus on the one topic which is to me very indicative or to diagnose this tendency of apparent alternative radical truths that effectively just reproduces the structure of the existing power, what I call in my books transgression. It is what? Let me begin by a scene from one of my most favorite British movies, Monty Python's Meaning of Life. Somewhere in the middle there is an episode where the pupils in a class wait for the teacher to arrive. They are bored, they sit calmly at their benches, yawning, staring into the air. Then one of them, standing close to the door, shouts, "Oh, the teacher is coming!" And the pupils explode into the wild activity of shouting, throwing papers, shaking their tables, all the stuff pupils are supposed to do when the teacher is absent. So that when the teacher enters, he can be annoyed and shout at them, "Stop this service, quiet," and so on and so on. I think the insight of this is a very deep one. That all that wild children's activity, which apparently annoys the teacher, is really staged for his gaze. It is not spontaneous amusement. It is something performed for the teacher. And I think the same goes for our most intense forms of enjoyment, which are not spontaneous outbursts, but something learned by intention, an acquired taste. I appeal to your memory. Remember your first experience of drinking a hard liquor or smoking. As a rule, it was a slightly older peer who told you half the secret. Whiskey, cigarettes, and then you try it and you must admit, horrible, horrible. How can you learn to enjoy it. And I claim which one goes for sex. It's the same as with drinks. If you want pleasure, you drink stupid things. All other higher pleasures require pleasure. Same goes for sex. But let me go on now into more serious domain. A similar lesson can be learned from it may appear that in the middle of a polite conversation, you get really mad, you cannot hold back anymore, you are totally frustrated, so you explode. I claim this is not how it is. I claim that precisely when apparently you lose your nerve, explode. At that point, you follow the ritual, the formula until it's well, totally. How maybe I'm a madman here, but I have a ritual with my good friends. When we meet, each week for conversation and so on, for the first 5 minutes, we engage in a 5-10 minute session of rough, tasteless swearing, offending each other. You know, all the animagical stuff of we from ex-Yugoslavia, we know how to do it, like I will dig your dead mother out of her grave and screw her up her ass. It's all there. And then a miracle happens. After 5-10 minutes of this, we looked at each other friendly and we say, okay, now, this boring ritual is behind us, now we can act like normal people and talk nicely and so on. I find this a wonderful structure, which works. But now things get more serious. We should apply this lesson, I think, also to forms of collective violence, like gang rapes and killings. One of the terrifying effects of the non-contemporaneity, different levels of social life today in the world, is the rise of violence against women. Not just random violence, but systematic violence. Violence which is specific to a certain social context, which follows a pattern which transmits a clear message. For example, while we were right to be terrified at the gang rapes in India, you remember a couple of months ago, a girl was raped by 5 men in a bus. Ooh, it was reported in all media. But as my friend Arundhati Roy pointed out, the cause of this unanimous outburst of moral indignation was that the rapists were poor, from the lower strata. She told me, well, if you want to be shocked, you don't need to wait for those buses. Go to the use their institutionary. For example, you can buy girls from almost age, bought from poor Nepal farmers as sexual slaves, and so on and so on. Or another phenomenon which really shocked me. But ritualized. I read 2 days and spoke with some of my Mexican friends. It's horrible. In Ciudad Juárez, the ideal working class there are young single women. And of course, this is an affront to independent young women. So a ritual emerged. A certain number, up to 100 every year, are serially raped and then slowly tortured to death. Like first they cut off their breasts with scissors and so on and so on. But what I try to say is that what is so terrifying about it closely, and that's my point. This is not some kind of elementary outburst of male fury. It's a clear symbolic. It's a social ritual. Interestingly, this is what the police tries to blaze down, to play down. Incidentally, as you can expect it, the only person who was punished in Ciudad Juárez now was a mother whose daughter was killed in conflict. Now you will say I'm playing an American racist, blaming the 2 Mexicans. Let's go to the other side. North, Vancouver, you know, Canadians arrogant, like we are the best of America, half Europe. I was told by my friends there, and I even read some parliamentary investigation reports, like you can find it on the web. Forsaken, the report of the Muslim Women Commission of Inquiry. Also, close to Vancouver, you have some reservations where, and again, young white people go there and kidnap a Indian Native American girl. They rape her, seriously torture her to death, dump the body. Ritualized activity. And what police investigation downplays is precisely this social ritual aspect. They systematically try to read it as family matter among Native Americans. That's what probably mother is a drug addict, father is a drunkard, and so on. You know, this dimension of ritualized activity disappears. Of course, it's the same with an obvious example in our society. What is crucial is that it's not simply that there are pedophiles everywhere, so there are also in the Catholic Church. The problem is in what sense and to what degree pedophilia is a kind of what I call institutional unconscious, an obscene institutional secret ritual part identity like this from the way the Catholic Church in most countries reacts to it, in this immediately protective way, and so on and so on. Now, the first lesson from this, I don't try to develop it in my books, I develop it in detail, is that when you observe a certain, analyze a certain ideology, and ideology for me is a very wide term. It's not just ideology in the sense of the big symbolic field of an elaborated theory and so on. No, ideology is for me something that penetrates and structures our everyday lives. The way I experience foreigners, the way I find certain things pleasurable, other things non-pleasurable. There, for example, I read recently, I will avoid mentioning my standard example, which I repeated so often that I am bored by it, of the structure of different toilets in different countries. But, for example, recently I read a wonderful structure of kitchen sinks, the first in Denmark and in Sweden.
Vandelelelele.
The whole ideology, getting rid of that excess of food. So my first point is, every ideological field is immanently, necessarily inconsistent. It has a certain set of rules, but also the way these rules so to get an ideology, you must now I want to move to illustrate this point to a more political aspect. This inconsistency of an ideological legal order in China. When I was in China, of course, I asked this unpleasant question. Like, you know, this usual question, like, you pretend to be still a communist country, where is the working class, where is communism, and so on and so on. And it shocked me how they react. Not so much that they try to squeeze out some argumentation. I told them, okay, you pretend to be communist country, communism is working class, where is the working class? That you know that I am confusing. Let's because communism is the science of social which teaches you how to fight. And Marxist analysis teaches that for happened to me back in London, 1 mile north from here at Birkbeck College, where half a year from now, I think so, we had a conference, The Actuality of the Theological Politics. And at some point there were 3 panelists up there talking stuff. And I think this is where we are. We have beliefs. I don't think we really live in an atheist era. It's much more complex. We believe maybe more than ever, but in this way that you are not ready to admit it publicly, and we have a whole set of strategies of how to display beliefs onto others. Do you really believe in it?
No, 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 no. No.
Here, wonderful notions can be mobilized. One is absolutely crucial one, the belief without believers. I think this is a fundamental category today. A certain belief can function socially without any person in the first person, as it were, actually believing. You know, like I read, for example, stupid example, ask a parent when he buys Santa Claus his or her children, do you really believe in Australia? Okay, but then ask the child. I promise you, she will say, of course, I'm not stupid. I just pretend to believe not to disappoint my parents and to get a... Nobody has belief, but it functions as a belief. And I claim it's exactly the same with most of religions today. But wait a minute. I am not saying they don't really believe they fake. No, their fake is their distance. I claim they really believe, but they are not ready to admit it. We believe in precisely in our cynical era, we believe much more than we are ready to admit. So, back to China. So we have this inconsistency, which is a necessary inconsistency. And what fascinates me so much is that the outcome of this complication is that you do not have explicit beliefs or norms, rules, even laws, and then what is prohibited. At a certain point, things function in a very weird way. At a certain point, you have prohibitions which not only determine what is prohibited, but which are themselves. You have to respect them, but you have to pretend that they don't exist as prohibitions. I'm sorry if I state here the same comment as I use the word, some of you know it. Like Stalinism, for example. The point, it wasn't only prohibited to criticize Stalin, it was absolutely even more prohibited to publicly say that it's prohibited to criticize. So all the system functions. So that's my point. In every social symbolic system, you never simply have rules and you always have a double display. On the one hand, you have prohibitions, which are everywhere made to be violent. Of the slave that your father there are rules with regard to which you are idiot if you don't follow. And then there are a much more interesting thing. The opposite thing. There are things which you are permitted, even solicited. You can do them. You have a choice to do them, but on condition that you don't use them. These are, I think, the most interesting. I'm not a pessimist here. What I want to say is that because of this, it happened to me late 70s. But we knew it. So on the eve of the election, we wanted to do a compromise. Should we do the heroic thing like publishing an issue of how to the reaction was incredible. We were immediately called to the center of the It wasn't a real thing, a comedy. But, and then I sympathized with the poor guy there, the bureaucrat, because he told them, boys, and we told him, please tell us what did we do wrong. You said these are free elections. We treated them as free elections. He wasn't able, because of course, he wasn't allowed to say, fuck you, you know that these are not free elections. He was just repeating, boys, don't provoke me, don't fuck with me. But it was tragic, because, you know, he wasn't able to. So I think that, again, back to this point, what I find so fascinating is precisely this structure, which is up to a point also, it's not just China, it's our structure. Where we are free, but we are so free that we are less and less even able to perceive where we are not free. Because where are we? We are free when we, and this is a good thing, I'm not trying to sell you some communist bullshit that is formal freedom. And there we know less and less. I claim on the contrary, we are approaching an era where economics they are made absolutely we don't know what is happening. So how then does ideology function in this? I think it functions by superego. You know the Freudian superego paradox. The more you are innocent, the more you are guilty. How does it function? The superego pressure does not squash your individuality. Superego pressure you become a member of the crown ashes and so on. On the contrary, as Etienne Balibar, superego interpolates subjects into individuals. That is to say, let's take ecology. You see superego. You know, I mean, you are colonial. My notion of time is Western, non-linear. Sorry, I will finish this, I'm sorry. No, I just want to say that this is for me the primary everyday form of ideology, precisely this false individualization, you know, like, don't blame institutions, look at yourself. What did you do to fight environment? Did you recycle Coke cans? Did you put all the newspaper, all the paper aside, where it individualizes you in this culpabilizing way? That's ideology at its purest. And I think even at the yes, ecology functions like this, like, you know, all this pseudo-individualizing, like, what did you do today to repay your debt to nature? Did you put all newspapers into a proper recycle bin? Did you put all the bottles of beer or cans of Coke into a special box or whatever, and so on and so on? Did you use air conditioning instead of the window, and so on and so on? And I find, you know, this, but you know what's the paradox here, and that's the superego dimension. That the more you control yourself, the more you try to be correct in this way, the more you feel guilty, the more you discover that you are infinitely guilty. I know with my American politically correct friends, you know, like this endless self-examination. Was I right to use that F word? What if it was offensive? I looked that woman in the eyes. Was it already a visual rape? And I claim that the more you go in this direction, you see, the more you try to be clean, the more you feel guilty. And of course, the trick of this is that at the same time, and this is for me why, as I always repeat, Starbucks is the ultimate ideological company today. Starbucks is capitalist genius at its purest. It takes into account the fact that today we have this politically correct fear. Nobody wants to be a pure consumerist. You know, you feel bad. Yeah, but they actually big posters claiming 5% of our profit go for some stupid Guatemala children, 5 other percent. So it's a wonderful idea. You can be peacefully a consumerist because your social duty towards nature and others, it includes into the price of the commodity, you know. It's perfect. Capitalism is again plays the game of culpabilization and so on. If you allow me just to briefly conclude what I little 2-3 minutes, no, because remember it's that to really approach a future in an open way, the first thing to do is cleansing, not ethical cleansing, but ethical cleansing of our dreams. I think we should, if precisely you want to do that, Stalinist version of communism is passé. But it's not simply passé. Today, where Stalinist communists are still in power, they are the best managers of capitalism today. No? But that's another irony. No? For social democratic welfare state, I don't think we can return. And this is for me, if you ask me. I sympathize with them. I read Piketty, I read Stiglitz, and so on. But they are for me too utopian precisely insofar as they want to be realistic. Look, what does Piketty do? The system, the way he admits just to raise taxes. I claim, if we are able to do this, in order to be able to do this, we already have to win. Because if he knows very well that the way capitalism is global, so it cannot be in one country. So his solution presupposes a kind of a global, at least legal economic authority which can impose worldwide measures. If this happens, we are already there, we already won. Stiglitz, the same problem, where he recently says in a very nice way, the problem is not capitalism, the problem is democracy. You just have to change the law to make them more what Hegel means by abstract thinking. You take one measure, let's do this. But wait a minute, if you really want to do this, you soon discover that you do other things. Next, just raising debt. Okay, capital flows abroad. So what will you do? You have to either isolate your country or enforce international measures, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, you have to do so many other things. It's difficult. So, again, a welfare state, I don't think we will return to it. But also, and this I will not very too much conclude, the last dream that happened is this so-called anti-representative direct local democracy. This is the real heart of the left. They are ready to drop communism, they are ready to drop social democratic welfare state, but, you know, people gathering together locally and so on. That, I think, doesn't work. First, in our today's predicament, what we need is, just imagine how can we fight biogenetics, how can we fight the problem of intellectual property, which I think we will need large regulatory measures which have nothing to do with this local democracy. The second illusion is this one. The idea of, and this is where I differ from most of today's radical leftists, they still have this dream, you know, locally, cooperative, and so on. This works up to a certain degree. This works, this direct popular mobilization. This works for me, and this is my big obsession. The true problem of a revolution is the morning after. That is to say, it's a relatively or Istanbul, the ghetto, whatever, or Athens, thousands of people demonstrating, and we all know how wonderful. What interests me is that for me the only of a revolt of social change. When after a month or two, how will we feel the change then? What I really get are enthusiastic leftists who like every 10 years a big event, and then they can meet once a year I don't care about them. Secondly, let me tell you something horrible, and I don't think I'm here reactionary. I'm here proper left. Can you imagine living in a city society where all the time and so on? I want to live in a society where an invisible network makes things function. I want to have peace to watch my city movies, to read books, and so on. You know, this is the truth. And here, I think we are in the trap. Because on the one hand, that's why I feel sometimes I go very weird Marxist. I develop this in many of my books. We are solving problems that I think, I'm sorry, contemporary capitalism doesn't have the means to cope with them. And I have here a great ally, the last time I met him. Even Fukuyama is no longer Fukuyama. He admits it, like ecology, biogenetics, you cannot do it within capitalism the way we have it now. On the other hand, I must say, I don't have any clear formulas how to do it. It's a big challenge because, okay, now you will say, why don't simply realistically accept where we are and just stay within the system that we are in? No, I think that what is happening now is something very dark. That gradually we are already approaching a new, almost I'm tempted to say, apartheid post-democratic society. Yes, we have democracy, it's more and more with growing problems and so on. We are approaching, what is happening now is new forms of apartheid, and connected to these new forms of, let's call it regression of, here I'm quite a naive progressive, why not? Regression of public, let's call it public. So here I'm a terrorist. The measure of progress is not we can debate. The measure of progress for me is progressive dogmatism. Let me take the case of rape. I wouldn't like to live in a society where I would have to argue all the time why women shouldn't be raped. I would like to live in a society where when someone proposes this, you know, this ridiculous thing, that we secretly enjoy it or whatever. Wasn't the same with torture? Torture was obscene. Now we are ready to debate about it. And I think that even if we win, like those who are against torture, predominant, the catastrophe is already here because we accepted it as the topic of today. And I claim more and more, you will see today, democratic for everyone, the result of the fall of the Berlin Wall, it fell 2-3 days ago, is that it's not. I almost remember Freud who said, whenever you dream, you can use castration. Well, okay, one thing is that's why we get walls everywhere. United States. Don't be put into this by the apparent gradual progress today. I claim that we are effectively in a dangerous year. The only solution will be a new apartheid, a new racist apartheid. But like today, you will get people who are in and I don't have a simple solution. Contrary to what some people claim, I'm not saying, oh, new proletarian revolution, new communist party or whatever. No, but we will be pushed into doing something. But to do this again, we have first to center out. Because I think the most situation rely on own dreams. Be it or just if we return to I think that's ideological. We have there are no easy ways out. So the situation is difficult. But precisely for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry if I was wrong. Thank you very much. Please, my standard joke, don't applaud so much, spare your energy. when we communists will take power, you will have to applaud, you know? Spare the energy for people's democracy, you know, when you will.
All right, we've got about 20 minutes left, and Slavoj would like to take one question at a time. So please put your hands up and start this at the round.
Very much. To give you an idea of my broad democratic spirit, I'm always for a dialogue, but if some of you are philosophers, you know which dialogues are my preferred ones. Late one guy talks all the time, and the other guy only says every 10 minutes something like, I feel you are right, Socrates. So let's get this type of a dialogue.
I'm afraid I can't promise that one here. But let's see. Men and women both put their hands up, please. Start with you.
Good evening. My name is Darko Ravsavnik. I have a background in contemporary dance, actually, and I'm studying my MA in Art and Politics at Goldsmith and at LSE at the moment. My question would be, in fact, I have two short questions. First question is... okay, sure.
They're electrically interconnected,
Thank you. Okay, very briefly. First question. I would like to come back to your ritual with your Yugoslavian friends, where you were saying that you enjoyed the freeing aspect of insulting each other. I would like to know if you would feel the same pleasure if there was a female in this part as well, and then if not, why not? My second part is, why do you think that the practice and the activity of reconstructing our identity keeps us from being passionate, compassionate lovers, whether men or female?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I will be very brief. First, the second one. It depends, one shouldn't be abstract. It depends of, I claim, I was not talking about constructing ourselves in some abstract way. I was talking about, this is the problem, about how the slogan, you should reconstruct your identity permanently and discover yourself, how this functions in today's society. I claim it functions in this way. And that's my big, we can disagree here, but I have a great admiration for Judith Butler. But this is my problem with her. It's very important. What she is describing is patriarchal identity, we are performing our shifting identity. I agree with her. I'm just claiming she's not describing a subversive model, but precisely the mode of subjectivity which is predominant in our society. Why does she think that she's saying something subversive? I don't think that today the predominant form of how we form social identity is still this patriarchal identification, and then you support it or whatever. No, father is something much more terrifying, much more oppressive. Father today no longer tells you to be obedient, discipline, and so on. Father is telling you, do you know how to be sexually active? Should I teach you? Discover yourself, and so on. Everyone knows it's much worse. The second question, insulting and so on. Well, you can believe me or not, but I can guarantee you there are definitely women in my country. But I will tell you another thing which may amuse you today. I almost got an attack to my friend, Amy Goodman. How do we find reactionary racism? And I told her simply through progressive racism. She thought I'm crazy, but what I meant is, and this is the form of this humiliation. I remember in ex-Yugoslavia, this was the part, almost, I don't get it. Part of this insulting, 10 racism. They were not against the other. Each Yugoslav nation identifies with a certain racist descent. I don't know, I think, no, sorry, Montenegro are lazy, Macedonians are thieves, Bosnians are sexually obsessive, we Slovenes are misers, and so on. And it was so wonderful because it was a kind of a friendly competition. We were telling each other jokes at our own expense, and each of us gladly identified with the cliché. It was not, oh, this is a cliché, really beneath it, we are much more complex human beings. No, I like to be my cliché. And then it works in such a liberating way. Don't you also feel this? I'm now appealing to your everyday experience. When I go to any country, India, China, they first give me the bullshit. Cultural, that monument. I tell them, tell me a dirty joke. And then the ice is broken. You do it. I claim that you need something like a minimal exchange of obscenities to do what I can only call with a naive term to establish an actual contact with another person. Otherwise, it is this terrifying politically correct racism. You know, this like, oh, how nice you are, you Western men are imperialists who exploit nature, but you have a dialogical relationship with Mother Nature, you know, and so on. I claim that, but on the other hand, I'm well aware that humor as such doesn't liberate. Here I violently disagree with He's totally wrong in claiming that, you know, laughter is a threat. No, if you look closely at totalitarian so-called systems, laughter can also be a brutal laughter of those in power. But I claim that, nonetheless, of course I'm not talking about racism in the sense of humiliating the other. But this wonderful game, you must know them, I will not repeat them, like the one I always repeat is that joke about Montenegro friends are telling me all the time. Standard Yugoslavia. It's an earthquake country, you know. How do a guy in there lazy masturbate? He digs a hole in the earth, put his penis in and waits for the earthquake. Because they are too lazy even to do the gestures and so on. And then this is wonderful. Then me as a Slovene, I add my obscenity, my Bosnian friends add another obscenity, and now you will say, what about the civil war? Ah, that's my ultimate proof. Already in the early 80s, when nationalism was exploding, that's my ultimate proof of the progressive nature of this joke. They disappeared. They were incompatible with real ethnic hate. They are slowly emerging only now, in an incredibly subversive way. Like in Bosnia, you remember Srebrenica, the terrible slaughter. I admit. They, not they other Bosnians, from Srebrenica, they already have jokes at their own account. You know, like a Bosnian from Germany returns to Srebrenica and says, oh my God, now it's peace, I want to buy land for a house there, and what are the costs? And the friend tells him, this is a complicated thing because, you know, when we were buying meat when we were young.
It's time for the baby's breakfast. Wow. Time sure flies when you're having fun. Alright, see you next time.